It was pouring rain the night everything changed. When a single father chose kindness over comfort, and unknowingly stepped into a chain of events that would save a life, a career, and restore faith in humanity. But before we dive into this emotional journey, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Everbell's Tales. Your support helps us share more stories that touch the heart and change perspectives. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, the kind that didn't rush or rage, but settled in with quiet determination, soaking everything it touched. By the time night arrived, the streets shimmered under streetlights, puddles reflecting broken images of passing cars and flickering signs. Daniel Carter moved quickly through the downpour, his shoes splashing softly against the wet pavement. He held a slightly bent umbrella above himself and his daughter's backpack, though most of the rain still managed to find its way onto his shoulders. His body ached with the familiar exhaustion of a man who carried more weight than anyone could see. At 35, Daniel felt older than his years. Life had forced that on him the day his wife passed away, leaving him alone with a toddler and a mountain of responsibilities he never had time to grieve properly. Since then, every day had been about survival. Work, school runs, meals, bills, and sleepless nights filled with quiet worry. Tonight was no different. He was late picking Lily up from her after-school program because his supervisor had kept him back again, reminding him, politely, but firmly, that patience at work was wearing thin. Lily walked beside him, small and quiet, her pink jacket zipped up to her chin. She never complained about the rain or the long walk home, and that somehow made Daniel's chest tighten even more. Children weren't supposed to be this understanding. He wanted to give her more comfort, more stability, more joy. But some days, just getting through felt like an achievement. The bus had been delayed, again forcing them to walk the last stretch home. Daniel checked his phone briefly, calculating how long it would take to heat leftovers and get Lily into bed before exhaustion claimed him entirely. The world felt heavy, every raindrop echoing the weight pressing down on his shoulders. As they approached the old bus stop near Maple Street, Lily suddenly slowed her steps. Daniel didn't notice at first, too lost in his thoughts, until her small hand tugged gently at his jacket. "Daddy," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the rain. He stopped and looked down at her. Her eyes weren't on him. They were fixed on something ahead. Daniel followed her gaze and saw him. An elderly man stood under the flickering streetlight, his thin frame bent forward as he struggled to take a step. His coat clung to his body, soaked through, offering little protection against the cold rain. One hand gripped a cracked wooden cane, the other clutched a small grocery bag that looked moments away from tearing. The man took another step and stumbled slightly, barely catching himself before falling. Daniel felt a familiar conflict rise inside him. He was tired, so tired. Every instinct screamed to keep walking, to get Lily home, to avoid another delay that would cost him precious minutes of rest. He had learned the hard way that stopping for others often meant falling further behind himself. But then Lily spoke again, her voice trembling just enough to pierce through his defenses. "He looks cold," she whispered, "okay?" There was no judgment in her words, no expectation, just concern. Daniel swallowed hard. He remembered a time when he had stood alone in the rain, overwhelmed and unseen, wishing someone would notice. He remembered how loneliness could ache worse than hunger or exhaustion. With a quiet sigh, Daniel adjusted his grip on the umbrella and took a step toward the old man. "Sir," Daniel called out gently. The man looked up, his eyes cloudy with age but sharp with surprise. Rain streamed down his deeply lined face, carving paths through years of hardship and memories. "Are you all right?" For a moment, the man didn't answer. He seemed embarrassed, as though being noticed was almost as painful as the struggle itself. Finally, he nodded weakly. Just trying to get home," he said, his voice thin but steady. Daniel noticed how his hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from effort. Without another word, Daniel shifted the umbrella so it covered the old man too. Instantly, the rain drummed harder against Daniel's back, but he didn't pull away. "Here," he said, offering his arm. "Lean on me." The man hesitated, pride flickering across his face, then slowly accepted. His weight was lighter than Daniel expected, which somehow made it worse. They began walking together, step by careful step, Lily trailing close, watching silently. "My name's Daniel," he said, trying to ease the tension. "This is my daughter, Lily." The man smiled faintly. "Harris," he replied. "George Harris." His breath came in short bursts as they walked, and Daniel slowed his pace without even thinking about it. Mr. Harris explained that the bus had stopped running earlier than usual due to the storm. He lived alone now, his wife gone for many years, his daughter living far away with her own busy life. "Didn't think the rain would be this bad," he admitted quietly. "Was I was wrong." When they reached the modest apartment building where Mr. Harris lived, Daniel noticed how the stairs looked steeper than they should, especially for someone his age. Without asking, Daniel took the grocery bag from his hand. One of the handles tore immediately, and Daniel quickly gathered the items before they spilled onto the wet ground. Inside the dim hallway, Daniel leaned the old man against the wall and knelt down, pulling a roll of tape from his bag, something he always carried for Lily's school projects and emergency fixes. He wrapped it carefully around the cracked cane, reinforcing it enough to last a while. Mr. Harris watched him with quiet amazement. "You didn't have to do all this," he murmured. Daniel shrugged gently. "Someone once helped me when I needed it," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was entirely true. Maybe he just wanted to believe in that idea. Once Mr. Harris was safely inside his apartment, Daniel made sure he had dry towels and enough groceries within reach. Lily waved shyly from the doorway. "Good night," she said. Mr. Harris smiled at her, his eyes glistening. "Good night, Angel," he replied. As Daniel turned to leave, soaked through and aching from the cold, Mr. Harris called out softly. "Young man." Daniel paused. "Kindness like yours," Mr. Harris said, his voice thick with emotion, "that never disappears. One day, when you least expect it, it finds its way back." Daniel offered a small, tired smile. He didn't respond. He didn't know how to. Some promises felt too big to believe. Back in the rain, Daniel and Lily continued their walk home. His clothes clung to him, and the weight of the day pressed down harder than ever. Yet something felt different. The rain no longer felt quite as cold. Lily slipped her hand into his, squeezing it tightly. "I'm glad we helped him," she said. Daniel looked down at her and nodded. "Me too," he replied softly. He didn't know it then, but that single choice, to stop, to care, to help, had already set something in motion. The rain kept falling, washing the streets clean, as if quietly preparing the world for what would come next. Morning arrived far too quickly. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., slicing through Daniel Carter's shallow sleep. For a moment he lay still, staring at the ceiling, the events of the previous night drifting through his mind. The rain, the old man's trembling hands, Lily's quiet concern. His body felt heavy. His muscles stiff from walking home, soaked to the bone, but there was no time to linger. Life didn't pause just because you were tired. Daniel swung his legs over the side of the bed and rubbed his face, already bracing himself for another day of careful balancing. From the next room came the soft sound of Lily coughing in her sleep, and his heart tightened with the familiar worry. He whispered a silent prayer that she wouldn't get sick. Missing another day of work was something he simply couldn't afford. By the time the sun crept weakly through the curtains, Daniel had Lily dressed, fed, and ready for school. She sat at the small kitchen table eating cereal while Daniel packed her lunch, his thoughts racing ahead to the day waiting for him. He'd been on thin ice at work for months now. Being a maintenance supervisor in a large corporate complex meant being available, punctual, and flexible, things that didn't always align with single parenthood. Every call from Lily's school, every unexpected illness, every broken babysitting arrangement had added another mark against his name. As he zipped Lily's jacket, she looked up at him. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked quietly. Daniel forced a smile. "Just a big day, sweetheart," he replied, kissing her forehead. He dropped her off at school with a wave, watching until she disappeared inside before turning back to his car, a knot forming in his stomach. When Daniel arrived at work, the building buzzed with a strange tension. Conversations hushed when he walked by. People checked their phones more often than usual, faces tight with worry. As he logged into his computer, a new email popped up in his inbox. Mandatory meeting with management, 10:00 a.m. His heart sank. There was no mistaking what that meant. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. He had known this was coming. The company had been restructuring for months, cutting costs, tightening policies. Someone like him, reliable but inconsistent, was an easy target. Daniel spent the next hour going through motions, fixing a light here, responding to a request there, but his mind wasn't in it. Every step toward the conference room felt heavier than the last. At 9:55, Daniel stood outside the glass-walled meeting room, staring at his reflection. He looked older than he felt. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slightly slumped. He thought of Lily's smile that morning, of the promise he had made to always take care of her. What happens if I lose this job? The door opened, and a manager called his name. Daniel straightened and stepped inside. Seated around the table were two senior managers he recognized, and a woman he didn't. She sat at the head of the table, composed yet distant, her posture professional but her eyes wary. Daniel Carter. One of the managers began, folding his hands. "Thank you for coming." The tone was formal, detached. The words that followed were familiar: attendance issues, reliability concerns, company standards. Daniel listened quietly, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He didn't interrupt. He had learned that defending yourself too early only made things worse. Then the woman spoke. "Before we continue," she said calmly, "I'd like to hear from Daniel." Her voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, curiosity maybe. "Is there anything you'd like to say regarding your situation?" Daniel hesitated. He could give excuses. He could apologize. But something in her gaze made him choose honesty instead. "I'm a single father," he said simply. "My daughter is 6. When I miss work, it's not because I don't care. It's because sometimes she needs me more." The room went quiet. One manager shifted uncomfortably. Another checked his notes. The woman watched Daniel closely, her expression unreadable. "That doesn't change company policy," one manager said. Daniel nodded. "I know," he replied softly, "but it's the truth." The woman leaned forward slightly. "May I ask you a personal question?" she said. Daniel looked up, surprised. "Did you help an elderly man walk home in the rain 2 nights ago?" For a second, Daniel thought he'd misheard. His heart skipped. "Yes," he answered slowly. "I did." The woman inhaled sharply, her composure faltering just enough for emotion to surface. "That man was my father," she said. "George Harris." The name hit Daniel like a wave. Recognition dawned instantly. The managers exchanged confused glances, clearly unprepared for this turn. The woman continued, her voice quieter now. "He called me that night. He was crying. My father doesn't cry. He told me a stranger stopped, carried his groceries, fixed his cane, and treated him like he mattered." Her eyes met Daniel's. "He told me your name." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Daniel didn't know what to say. He hadn't helped Mr. Harris expecting anything in return. He had barely thought about it afterward. The woman took a deep breath. "I'm Emily Harris," she said. "I was brought in to oversee operations and make difficult decisions." She paused, then added, "I was raised by that man alone after my mother passed. I know what it's like to grow up watching a parent sacrifice everything." She turned to the managers. "We're discussing terminating an employee who embodies the very values this company claims to uphold: responsibility, integrity, humanity." One manager frowned. "With all due respect, Emily, policy is policy." She nodded. "And policy can evolve." Emily looked back at Daniel. "Your attendance record shows struggle," she said gently. "But it also shows years of commitment. What you need isn't punishment, it's support." She proposed a solution: flexible hours, emergency leave options, and participation in a pilot childcare support program she had been advocating for. The room buzzed with tension as the managers debated quietly. Daniel's life did not transform overnight, but it began to shift in quiet, meaningful ways that Daniel Carter could feel even in the smallest moments. The days following that meeting felt lighter, as if a constant pressure he had carried for years had finally loosened its grip. For the first time since becoming a single father, Daniel no longer woke each morning with the same suffocating fear of losing everything. The flexible schedule Emily had fought for gave him breathing room to be present, room to care, room to simply be human. On certain afternoons, Lily waited for him in the small childcare room set up within the building, drawing pictures while Daniel finished his rounds. Her laughter echoed softly through the hallways, and coworkers who once passed him by with polite nods now stopped to smile, to ask about her day, to share stories of their own families. Kindness, it seemed, was contagious. Emily proved to be exactly the kind of leader her father had raised her to be. She didn't hide behind titles or closed doors. Instead, she walked the floors, listened to concerns, and slowly reshaped a company culture that had long prioritized productivity over people. The pilot programs expanded. Emergency leave policies, parental support initiatives, and flexible scheduling became more than just corporate language. They became lifelines. Daniel watched the change with quiet amazement, never forgetting that it all traced back to a rain-soaked night and a simple decision to stop walking. Yet, despite all the progress, something tugged at him. A sense that there was more to be said, more gratitude to be expressed. One afternoon, Emily approached Daniel with a gentle smile. "My father has been asking about you," she said. "He'd like to see you again, if you're willing." Daniel didn't hesitate. He had thought of Mr. Harris often, wondering how he was doing, hoping the repaired cane had lasted long enough for him to get a proper replacement. A few days later, Daniel and Lily found themselves walking down Maple Street once more. This time, the sky was clear. Sunlight filtering through the trees, the street looking almost unfamiliar without the rain. Mr. Harris waited near the same bus stop, standing straighter now, leaning on a sturdy new cane. When he saw them, his face lit up with a smile so warm it seemed to erase years from his features. "There you are," he said, his voice steady and bright. Lily ran ahead, hugging him gently around the waist. They sat together on a nearby bench, the sounds of the city humming softly around them. Mr. Harris spoke of small things. How his daughter visited more often now, how he felt less invisible since that night. "You reminded me I still matter," he told Daniel, his eyes glistening. Daniel shook his head. "I just didn't want you to fall," he said quietly. Mr. Harris chuckled. "Sometimes," he replied, "not letting someone fall is the greatest gift of all." Emily watched them from a short distance, emotion written openly across her face. "That night changed more than you know," she said. "It reminded me why I chose this path." She explained how her father's call had shaken her, how his tears had forced her to confront what leadership truly meant. "Numbers matter," she said, "but people matter more." Inspired by Daniel's story, Emily proposed broader changes to the board. Programs supporting single parents, caregivers, and employees facing unexpected hardships. She used Daniel's experience as proof that compassion and productivity were not opposites, but partners. The results spoke for themselves. Morale improved, turnover dropped, and teams worked together with renewed purpose. Daniel watched coworkers who once feared speaking up now find their voices. He saw supervisors soften, policies bend, and humanity return to a place that had once felt cold and rigid. All of it stemmed from a moment of empathy that cost nothing but time. At home, the changes were just as profound. Evenings were no longer rushed battles against exhaustion. Daniel and Lily cooked together, laughed together, and talked about their days. One night, as Daniel tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with thoughtful eyes. "Daddy," she asked, "why did helping that man change everything?" Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because kindness doesn't stop where it begins," he said. "It keeps moving, touching places we can't see." Lily smiled sleepily. "I want to help people like that," she said. Daniel kissed her forehead, his heart full. "You already do," he whispered. Weeks later, on a quiet afternoon, Daniel received a handwritten letter from Mr. Harris. The words were simple but powerful. Gratitude, pride, and a reminder that the world is shaped not by grand gestures, but by ordinary people choosing to care. Daniel folded the letter carefully and tucked it away, knowing he would return to it on hard days. Standing by his window that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel reflected on how close he had come to losing hope. He realized now that life hadn't rewarded him for being kind. It had simply revealed what kindness had been capable of all along. The rain had tested him. The moment had defined him, and the kindness he offered, without expectation or reward, had come full circle, saving his job, strengthening his family, and planting seeds of compassion far beyond his own life. Daniel no longer feared the future. He understood now that as long as he and Lily carried empathy in their hearts, they would never truly be alone, at frozen, afraid to hope. Finally, one manager sighed. "We'll try it," he said, on a probationary basis. Daniel's chest tightened, emotion flooding in. His job wasn't just saved, it was redefined. Emily offered him a small smile. "My father said your kindness reminded him the world still has good people," she said. "Today, you reminded us too." As Daniel left the room, his legs felt weak, his mind spinning. He stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and sent Lily's school a quick message to confirm pickup. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a possibility. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Ever Bell's Tales. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful, emotional stories that inspire hope, compassion, and humanity. Stay with us, because every bell rings for a reason.